Evening. The Madison County Board of Education work session for March 9th, 2023 is in session. Ms. Bates, would you do the invocation for us?
Brian broke it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Y'all ready?
Yes.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the weather that you give us that keeps us on our toes and reminds us to bring layers. And dear Lord, I pray that you would be with every person that's here tonight. We thank you for the opportunity to serve our community and to serve you in there also. Pray that you give us all wisdom as we make decisions and that we would keep the best interest of our students in mind. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay.
Try this again.
It's just real hot. Okay. All right. Technology updates. Miss Nikki Rodman.
You are finished, just a nice record. If you want to use it, you're welcome to. If not, I'll have the presentation up on the board as well. Let's see. Yeah, we can take it back to the beginning. Okay. So thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time this evening. We've got a couple of updates to go through, as well as I'd like to give just a department snapshot, since this is the first time I've been able to present since Mr. Jones and Mr. Byrd have been able to come onto the board. And so just to give an look of kind of what the IT department does, what we do on a daily basis, and then we're also going to cover a couple of policy and agreement changes and updates. One of those being the data governance policy and the acceptable use policy is now, and we're going to propose an agreement. And then also SIPA compliance, and I'll explain as we go on each of those. So every day, our mission in the IT department is to provide excellent support for staff, maintain infrastructure, and provide tools to increase the educational value of our school system. And then the kicker is always for the good of our students. So with everything we're putting together, all the equipment we support, all the infrastructure we support, and the service that we do, it's always for the good of the students, and we try to keep that in mind. Here's our structure. We're really 4 divisions inside the department: data, security, system, and service. In each of these, we may have multiple members that are also on other teams, but this is kind of how we divide ourselves out. They're kind of self-explanatory. Data just being PowerSchool, mainly student information. Security, that's physical security as well as cyber security. System, which is all the equipment that's going on in the background to make our network run. And then service. And service is the big chunk where our technicians spend their time in the schools looking after student needs and staff needs as well. We actually hope that this structure grows as our department grows, as our needs grow. And so roadmap down the line, I hope I have an opportunity to come back and kind of share with you some of the other divisions we'd like to put into IT. So an overview of the physical equipment that we kind of cover. There's a lot of numbers on here, but just on a daily basis, physically, we have 35,000 Chromebooks, 7,000 PCs, 830 iPads, 274 Macs, 1,100 cameras, 28 DVRs, 651 switches, 760 access points, 3,294 phones, speakers, and horns, 27 PBX. That's what controls all of those, the phones, the speakers, and the horns. Raptor, Centegix, and Halo devices, which are security devices. Too many copiers, fax machines, and printers to count, and growing. And then we also support smart TVs, interactive panels, projectors, physical cabling, outlets that you see in the walls, digital signs, antennas, MiFi, athletic cameras, and the list goes on. Digital integrations. So not only do we have the physical equipment needed to run the network and the system from an IT perspective, we also have the integrations, the portals we manage, and those products that we support that aren't necessarily in our department, but rely on the network or student data to run. And you can see a pretty big list here. I kind of just went until the screen was full. So this is not an exhaustive list. It's just some of what we do. If you will notice, about 6 down, Clever. Inside Clever are 65 integrations, so those integrations aren't even listed on here. So we not only support students in the school, staff, instruction, kind of like the structure that Mr. Kubik has laid out, we support everything above and below. I'm very fortunate to have a great team of people that works on all these things on a daily basis. There are 15 of us that work on all these systems and programs. So that's a kind of an overview of what we do. I'm going to pause for just a second and just see if I can clarify or answer any questions specific about the IT department and what we do. Maybe if Mr. Byrd or Mr. Jones has a question about what we do.
Yes, ma'am, I do. Security cameras at the schools. How often are the individual cameras checked to make sure they're working, make sure that they're having a good enough picture so that the students who misbehave can be shown those videos to their parents when they don't believe it?
So we have the protocol in place regarding what we can and can't do with student video.
I'm aware of that. I'm talking about the cameras themselves.
Yes, so the physical cameras are maintained as often as we can get to them. We rely heavily on the school administrator who has access to those devices to let us know when there's a device that's down or not working, or if the clarity is not what it should be. I do have a staff of one on the network side. And so he is doing his best to keep up with all those physical cameras. When we install them, we have a list of protocols in place where we're changing passwords and making sure that the default password on those cameras is changed to what we know it should be. And then we have a centralized unit where we can scroll through all of the cameras throughout the district and just review.
So an individual principal or administrator reports to you by email the camera doesn't work in one hallway, and then you send somebody out in a timely manner to repair it?
Correct, we do.
Thank you.
And then preventatively, if one of us is in the central device, the management system, and sees that something is not presenting the way it should, or there's a connection fault, then we'll address those proactively. Yeah. Any other questions about anything that the IT department does? Okay. So we're going to kind of move into the meat of this presentation. And this is kind of where I want to spend the bulk of our time. But don't worry, it's not a long presentation. We'll hopefully move through these pretty quickly. But we just have some housekeeping items from the IT department that we need to take care of those. And the first of is data governance. The data governance policy is a requirement from the state. It is a monitored document. When we go through compliance monitoring, there is a checklist. It's actually the second section from the back in the printed documentation or in the meeting notes that you have that governs what should and shouldn't be in this policy. We are covered on all those. We can check off all those on the rubric for compliance. However, this document was created in 2015, and you can imagine in 8 years' time, there's some things that needed to be updated. So the largest updates that you're going to see in the data governance is really in presentation. So I'm going to have Austin pull these up side by side where you kind of see the documents that we have. The flow of the document was really kind of chunky. And so with the help of the communications department, and I just want to say thank you to Carter and Alita who went through and did a lot of this restructuring for the document so that it looks a lot more presentable than what it's been in the past. See if we can pull those up side by side. Okay. Okay, if you want to do that, I'll continue on. So really structurally, we just changed the organization. So now the table of contents actually comes first, and then we give the description of the document, and we did some language updates. Like I said, the grammar was a little chunky, so we wanted the cadence and the rhythm of the document to be a lot more reader-friendly. This is not an easy document to read. It's not a fun piece of reading either, so we tried to make it as presentable as possible. The data governance policy for the IT department is how we know what we can do and who should do what with the information and systems, as I've mentioned, that we support through our department. So if you can see as he's scrolling through, the original document is on the left, the proposed document is on the right. And there are no sweeping changes. We do have to be compliant with the checklist that's in the back of the document. It requires student data or connection to the network. There are some guidelines in this data governance policy that do require us for all third-party integrations to have an MOA. An MOA is a memorandum of agreement or a memorandum of understanding, and as per this document, that is a requirement for any third party that we join into a contract with. So what we're proposing is just kind of the renewal of the Data Governance Committee, those people who are listed in the document, and me, and assess requests from individual schools to determine if those requests are safe from a physical standpoint, from a cyber standpoint, and also, did they meet the requirements of the data governance policy? Do they meet the scope of our own educational policies, and can we point them back to the strategic plan? So it's a good opportunity for the instructional department, the IT department, accounting, and other admin to get together and as a district start to synthesize what we're using and what third parties we're allowing. We have a little bit of a hodgepodge of instructional tools, assistive technology tools that we would really like to bring in this umbrella to kind of unify and create some equitability across the whole district. So that's really the meat of what we're asking. And to do this, what we're proposing is we do a request of digital resources form. So I have created a form already. It's ready to go that we'll put out to the schools. If they would like to request some kind of digital resource, they can go here. We'd ask that an administrator be the representative from every school, and they submit the request for that third-party app, that instructional tool, that piece of equipment that needs to be connected to the network, and then have the Data Governance Committee come together to assess those requests. After we establish this pattern, it is my hope that we go into the 2023-2024 school year, that we use a platform that we're about to kind of roll into that's going to help us manage all the contracts. So you saw in all those things that we support through the IT department, the integrations. Each of those integrations has to have a contract. Each of those has to be reviewed. Each of the privacy policies and the sharing of data information has to be reviewed. So what we're trying to do is just make a really easy one-stop organized process to put these in place. So I'm going to pause for just a second because that was a lot of information. Systems, how staff should use system, and how also students should behave with technology. So the basic overview for the acceptable use is the responsible use of technology, access and what's to be expected when you're given access to the MCSS network, how you are to behave with those tools, and then what right of privacy do you have. So the understanding is that technology is a privilege, not a right. And we want to make clear that when we're dealing with student and staff data, what the expectation is for those users and what the expectation is from the IT department as far as support goes. So the changes for the acceptable use policy, you can see from the left to the right, and as we scroll down, we did change some terminology. We added in some sections, one of those being a section specifically for the Americans with Disabilities Act. We kind of moved that around a little bit. We also added in the care of MCSS property, what you can and can't do with school-issued property, such as stickers, writing, different things that would deface the equipment, and the care of those things and who's responsible. Cyberbullying was a big one as we move into more of a digital world and how the kids interact with each other, as well as covering copyright and plagiarism, and then how we handle personal technology devices. And the big section on that one is just the definition of what a personal technology device is, that they are allowed on campuses. However, it's at the discretion of the teacher or the administrator when they can use those devices. This is a rather lengthy document. I do want to point out that it goes into a lot of explanation on privacy, and that I think is just as much to protect our department as it is to protect the students. Again, that's a lot of information. There's a lot of paragraphs to these, so if you have questions, I'm going to stop here for just a moment and see if we can follow up with any.
Has this been, Ms. Thompson, have you looked at this agreement yet? Okay. 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 So the policy, do you know the previous acceptable use policy? Where'd that come from? I know you said it's not a state or federal, but I remember for many, many years. So is that a best practice from the state or what?
So from my understanding, in 2015, if you were to go back and look at most of the districts in Alabama, the formatting for both the data governance policy and the acceptable use policy are almost identical. So someone on a committee at the state level at that time probably produced a document, and then every district kind of copy and pasted and cleaned it up a little bit at the time that the data governance policy was enacted. And then the acceptable use policy over time has become technology use agreement, acceptable use. It's kind of changed iterations as we've gone. And in the latest meeting with Alabama Leaders in Educational Technology, I met with them 2 weeks ago, and the executive director of ALET specifically covered policies and procedures, which was very timely for what we were trying to do. And both she and the CIO at Hoover City Schools, who is a longtime director, both said that they combed everything they could possibly find from the ALSDE and could not find any regulations saying that we had to have an acceptable use policy.
Okay.
There are several others we have to have. We have to have a cyberbullying. We have to have a virtual school policy. We have to have the data governance policy, but the acceptable use policy is never explicitly stated. All right, Austin, if you'll go back to the slideshow. And then the last item, and we'll move quickly, is SIPA. This is a requirement for schools receiving funding from certain entities, specifically because we use E-rate funds to support our network functions. We have to have this policy, this SIPA compliance, and that stands for the Children's Internet Protection Act. This policy basically makes sure that we meet two requirements, and I'm just going to read these requirements to you because as documented proof for certifying our E-rate program, we've got to show that we've had a public hearing regarding how we're handling the Children's Internet Protection Act. And so that's why it's included specifically as a line item in the board agenda, so we can include that in our proof. So the two requirements are that the internet safety policy shall include monitoring the online activities of minors, and two, as required by the Protecting Children in the 21st Century Act, they shall provide for educating minors about appropriate online behavior, including interacting with other individuals on social networking websites and in chat rooms, and cyberbullying awareness and response. So for the first of those two requirements, we do use online monitoring software and tools. That is something we're heavily engaged in on a daily basis, and I'd be happy to provide more information to you guys individually should you have questions about what we're using and how we're using it. But we do have a person on our staff who is tasked with filtering and monitoring. That's her full-time job. So we feel like we're pretty heavily covered in the first area. In the second part of that is the instructional part of information technology being cyberbullying and awareness, behavior, netiquette, those things, the way children behave online. That is part of our technology education course of study. And so I feel like at various stages we are covering these as they are different grade level appropriate. Okay, so elementary, secondary, we cover those a little bit differently, but we do meet both of those requirements, both in our standards and in our monitoring activity. That pretty well covers it. Can I answer any questions about SIPA compliance or the tools that we have in place?
You mentioned public meeting. Did I understand you say and it says require public announcement, so do we annually have a public meeting that families?
We do now.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
the public meeting is the board meeting. That's what we are, but I would really like to look at additional community resources, and that's something that I'm hoping to work with the communications department on providing for our families. I will tell you as a personal side note, I'm very passionate about educating families about how their children use technology because I think children are very fluent. Parents struggle with what they should and shouldn't be allowing their children to do. So it is our hope with some initiatives that we're working on coming forward that we can provide additional community resources. Our monitoring software actually provides a website. It's already ready to go. We just need to link up with the communications department to see if that's something we can produce that gives resources for families. And so we're moving in that direction and hopefully in the near future.
Okay.
No other questions? Thank you. Sure.
So we give a child a piece of equipment to use, and obviously things break normal. What happens when they break animals? You know, pick up this Chromebook and throw it off. Who's responsible?
It kind of depends on the funding source. So, as written in our acceptable use agreement, the responsibility for the use and care of the equipment is on the parent of the child as far as financial restitution. However, it depends if these devices were paid for with federal funds, we cannot charge the student. So it's been practice and recommendation from our department with students who are repeat offenders with accidentally on purpose breaking equipment that we downgrade the equipment they have access to until they can responsibly use it.
Thank you, Ms. Rodman. I like that. Okay. That's all of our informational items. We're going to go ahead and go right into our special session. Mr. Cubitt?
I recommend approval of the agenda dated March 9, 2023.
Motion.
A motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of agenda dated March 9th, 2023. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, item 5, requests to address the board. We have one request, Mr. Ernest C. Are you, okay? If you could go to the podium for us, sir. I'm going to read a statement before you begin. Okay, so all right. So your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. In the event you wish to address the board on an issue involving the general reputation and character, physical condition, professional competence, mental health, and in some instances, job performance of an individual or confidential student information, the board will hear your comments in executive session. If you're unsure whether your comments should be made in executive session, please see our board attorney, Ms. Cynthia Thompson. Okay. You just let us know when you're ready, sir.
Listening to the reading, I think something that I was going to say might kind of violate, but maybe I might come back to talk it in executive session. But this first time, I would like to just speak openly. So I'll try to restrict myself not to go that far,
Okay.
which I would have loved to do, but I'll try to restrict myself from doing that. And then I'll come back a later date to say that in executive, whatever session that should be
Okay.
closed.
That's fine.
And I'm a parent, and like I think I said to somebody on the board that it's the circumstances that I'm here. I would have loved for it to be under another circumstances, but I think my family was targeted by some employees of the school district, because and I was listening to the lady who did the presentation. She said, always for the good of our students. And then it made me to think whether what happened to my family was for the good of the students. So, and we were requested to give certain documents because we had bought another house and in the same school district, but zoned different. And the school year is almost over. So, and my kids were basically giving open letters to tell them that in 10 days they can come back to school. Imagine the trauma that child has to face. Even my 7-year-old, all her things were packed and told that she couldn't come back to school. My 12-year-old was part of a drama club, and they were practicing, and because of that, they couldn't even do the drama because of the role she played. So, and I was thinking, my wife is a nurse practitioner. She treats people with mental conditions, and the trauma that the people responsible for that caused for my kids. I'm thinking, is that always for the good of the students? And there are policies within the school, and after all of that, I came to the school board and I met Dr. Ballard, and she was able to help me resolve the issue. I think she might have met with other people that work here, and they resolved the issue for me. But if this is available, if this resolution was available, how come those in authority who have direct access to the kids didn't know that? And I must say openly that in one of my address, and I want to apologize, a person might not be here, but I use a foul language, and I'm ashamed of that. But because of the stress that it caused for my kids, I can openly say that that person, of all the people I interacted with, was probably the least among them. The person who was the head in my original interactions, since I can't say things directly, that person to me was very they were condescending. I guess maybe it's the way I look, maybe it's the way I sound, or maybe it's the way we sound. Because some of the statements that were made to my wife was, can you own 2 homes? And I guess when people look at people from the outside and not dressed, usually I don't dress like this. If I go to school or go to most things, I wear like old jean pants and old T-shirts.
Thank you, Mr. C. Thank you.
While I'm leaving, I would like to have a former report, the first report that was made for my family. I would like to have that. And the elementary school for my daughter, she was shown of pornography, and the school hasn't contacted us. I contacted
Thank you,
people
ma'am.
here.
Thank you,
and
Mr.
at the
C.
school.
Thank you.
Never got back to us up to now.
Mr. Cube?
All right. I recommend approval of the contracts or services as submitted.
A motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of contractual services as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I recommend that the employment of employee number 1, a teacher at Madison Crossroads Elementary School, be terminated effective March 10th, 2023.
Second.
A motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of termination of employee number 1, Madison Crossroads employee, effective, what date did you?
March 10, 2023.
March 10, 2023. All those in favor? Aye.
I recommend the employment of employee number 2, a CMP worker at Buckhorn High School, be terminated effective March 27, 2023.
Motion.
A motion and a second for the recommendation for termination of employee number 2, a CMP worker at Buckhorn High School, be terminated effective March 27, 2023. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I recommend approval of the personnel items as submitted.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of personnel items as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I recommend approval of the supplemental contracts as submitted.
Motion.
Motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of supplemental contracts as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
I recommend approval of the residential lease agreement for the house located on the property of Madison County Elementary School as submitted.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of the residential lease agreement for the house located on the property of Madison County Elementary School as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. So we have certification to go into executive session for pending litigation. I need a motion. There a motion? I need a second. All right. All those in favor? Aye. So we are adjourned into executive session.